Probably makes it easier to explain where we are. We look over Table Bay, right across, and we can see the soccer stadium and we can see Cape Town. Valley basically runs it's about 11 kilometers, and it runs from where we can see the west coast to all the way to the other side. If you're up on the hills there, you can actually see Falls Bay. It's about 28 kilometers away. That plays a major role in your winemaking in the area. You've got the so-called Cape Doctor, which is the cold southeasterly wind that blows into the valley, and it keeps the vines very, very healthy. And the low temperatures obviously makes it perfect world for Sauvignon Blanc. I've had the question here of what is my favorite varietal. I don't have a favorite kid, but I think very often your most difficult kid is probably the one that you give most attention to. And with Sauvignon Blanc, that is definitely the case. It's a very, very unforgiving varietal. We always say that every little mistake that you make, it hits you double the size of the mistake. So through the years, we've become very, very aware of how to treat it in the vineyard and in the cellar. When we achieve it, like we just did the 2020 Durbanville Hills blend, and if you look at the quality of that wine, really you're proud of that kid. I see quite a few of you selected the Collector's Reserve, the Merlot, Pinotage, Chenin and Sauvignon. Those are all very, very good food wines. I see from Durban we've got more or less the same selection in the Hills. And just to explain the difference to you between the two ranges. In the Hills range, we obviously get a lot of feedbacks from retailers, worked out exactly, and we spend a lot of time in the market to find out feedback what they get from their drinkers, from their clients that buy it. That feedback for us is immensely important. We're not a factory that we can change things overnight, but for instance, when we started off back in 99, at that stage on Sauvignon Blanc, everyone wanted that green pepper flavor, what we call methoxypyrazine. You basically get it by keeping Sauvignon Blanc pretty closed under the leaves. Also gives you a very firm acidity, and you probably heard it from some people that they're complaining with Sauvignon Blanc about the high acidity. Now, by about 2005, we found that the market has changed totally, and everyone wanted tropical. As I said, we're not a Coca-Cola factory, so we had to go back out in the vineyards, spend a lot of time there and look at what we can change. And it was actually very simple. If you work with good viticulturists, it's actually very simple to change it. So what we did is we just slackened the trailer system. So the vines were where they used to be. We call it VSP, vertical shoot positioning, straight up in the trailer system. So we just slacked the wires and suddenly this happened. So you got more sunlight in, and sunlight breaks down that green pepper flavor. But the other good news, it also breaks down malic acid. So within a year, from 1 year to the other, I actually wanted to not take baby steps, but more. You can't just change your product from black to white and expect people to say it's still the same product. So from very green peppery to tropical was quite a brave move for us. We knew it was the right direction. But then 2005 was also a slightly warmer vintage, so there were more direct sunlight or intense sunlight. So it broke down more of the pyrazine and produced more of the flavors, what we call thiols, which is the precursor of that nice tropical flavor. There are 3 of them that are important. And that is enhanced by sunlight. So suddenly, when we brought out the 2005, I was quite nervous. And on the first wine shows, I got people coming to me. I can remember some of the buyers came to me and say, this was a bold move, but in definitely the right direction. So I think that was probably one of my moments in the industry that I was most relieved to see the acceptance of that big style change. Because normally if you change style, you adapt slightly. Sauvignon Blanc obviously is our bread and butter, the Hill Sauvignon Blanc, which I see is on the tasting in Durban, or on part of the menu. And then Merlot is a fairly easy variety to grow, sort of harvested sort of mid-season. When I arrived at Durbanville Hills, I had a huge concern with most of the reds. Because of that vertical shoot positioning, that closed system, we changed the trellises there as well to get more sunlight in, because the moment you keep it closed like that, some of your leaves on the inside become green because it's not exposed to sunlight, which is never good. We changed the trellis systems, especially on Merlot, quite drastically to what is called a smart Dyson system, where you basically bend down half of the trellis to the ground and half of it upwards. So you're sitting with you actually double the exposure of sunlight, which gives us great ripening, but especially very good color and very good fruit, which we were lacking in the beginning. When I arrived there, the wines for me always had a bit of a green tinge on it, and I was desperate to get away from it. And some people told me to live with it. It is what cool climate is about. I'm never one to believe that. There's always a change that you can make. Just getting more sunlight in changed our reds totally for the better. The Merlot is our biggest selling red varietal. And let's just quickly get to the difference between the Hills range and the Collector's Reserve. As I said, with the Hills range, we spend a huge amount of time in the market finding out what people want, that we can adapt very quickly. If you find a consistent comment on one of your wines, you need to adapt if it's negative. And with the Hills range through the years now, it's our 22nd vintage, I think we've known what the market wants. But then you're sitting with another concern. Then you need consistency, because if you find a style that people really like, and you can't have big differences, variances from year to year, which is very difficult on a smaller farm because you are exposed to nature. And some places the years are very different. In Durbanville, we're quite fortunate that being so close to the ocean, we are pretty much buffered by the cold water around us and the cooling winds. So our seasons are pretty similar. A lot of winemakers tells me I'm sitting in a boring area, because every vintage is more or less the same. Bring on boring for me any day, then I know what I work with. We started doing the Collector's Reserve, as the name says, collectors. So it's got to be able to age. It is our reserve range. So we had to do things very different there. But I think from a creativity side for the winemaking team, that was exactly what we needed. If you're not so bound by your consumer, you can really create something and say, maybe some people won't like it, but most people who like it will adore it. So we played there with a couple of blocks of vineyards. So most of them are selections from existing blocks that we know are very good. And then the trick is just to find those spots in those vineyards, because we know that there are better spots. To give you an example, with the Promenade Pinotage, for instance, we always pick it from the top of the hill downwards. It's a block that's open to the west coast. Hence the name Promenade, because I've got a joke that says a good Pinotage wants to see the ocean. And where do people in Cape Town go to see the ocean? They flock down to the Promenade. We always picked it from top to bottom. And we always found the first tank not much better, but definitely better than the other two, because the other two were also great. We got about 3 tanks out of that block. And so we went to the Collector's Reserve. I immediately said, okay, there's something different on the top of the block. I don't think the winemakers are tired by the second and third block, and they make the first one better. I think it's location. So we went up and we had a couple of profile holes made, and it's much more rocky up there. So it seems like the vines stress a bit more on the top side. They just gave us a perfect Pinotage to work with. On each and every varietal, that's more or less the same thing that we did. It's not so easy to find your spots on some of your flatter blocks. So there we use a program, it's called Fruit Look. It gives you a satellite image of the block once a week, and you can actually see the differences in the canopy. Gives you different colors for different density. And then I can go out with that photo and find the spots. I must do a new course now, because they are now down to the spot that they can actually give you GPS coordinates of where those spots are once a week. And you can actually see the differences in the canopy. Gives you different colors for different denseness or density. And then I can go out with that photo and find the spots. I must do a new course now, because they are now down to the spot that they can actually give you GPS coordinates of where those spots are, which will make it a hell of a lot easier, because if you go down, remember it's a trailer system, it's wires. So looking for a spot, if you go down the row, it's fine. But if you think the spot is on your left or right-hand side, it means climbing over trailer systems, which is not fun. I'm a bit big and old for going underneath. So that's how we found the spots on the other ones. On the Sauvignon Blanc, for instance, we looked up. I told our white wine maker that we will never be able to select the best spot in the best vineyard to make the best Sauvignon Blanc, because Sauvignon Blanc is all about complexity. So what I did is I told him with all the others, it's a screenshot that we take. Unfortunately for Sauvignon Blanc, it'll have to be a video of the whole valley to get the different spots in and get the complexity. So I selected 5 different vineyard blocks that I know give 5 different characteristics, went for the best spots in them, and then brought it into the cellar. We actually brought in a bit more blocks that we had a selection. I think we brought in, if I remember right, on the 18, we brought in 7 blocks, of which we selected 5 in the end for the blend. So the difference between the two wines is really a lot more creativity going into the Collector's Reserve range, where the Hills range is more about common sense, knowing what your consumer wants and trying to keep it as consistent as possible. Collector's Reserve as well, we drain off very close to about a third of the juice, we bleed off. So there's the skins to juice ratio is much closer. And then you get a lot more extraction, to the point that sometimes on the second half fermentation, we actually bleed back some of the wines that we bled off. Kobus, our white wine maker, was very creative on the Shannon by playing with different techniques in barrel, different sizes of barrel. We bought 500 and 600 litre barrels as well. I actually got the tip down in New Zealand. I was tasting down to the guys have Clary Bay, where they make their Tococo. It's a wooded Sauvignon Blanc. I spoke to them and they said to me the best thing I can get in the cellar, that's probably the best advice I've had ever, to build a big collection of healthy white barrels. With the cost of barrels in South Africa, the practice was normally that we ferment one vintage of white in it, and then it goes over into the red wine system because the reds mature longer. So you basically break it in with white wine. I was never too happy with the practice because for white wine, you actually want different barrels. So we made a policy change a couple of years ago and decided we buy the best white wine barrels that we can get for white wine and then keep them healthy. At the Cocoa, they showed me some of the barrels that they use were up to 13 years old. So you just get the fermentation advantage of a barrel where there's a lot of least contact. With a fermentation in a tank, for instance, you will get a lot of least contact, but as it settles down, you only have it in about the bottom meter that you still have a big exchange of lees that moves unless you stir it up with a pump. In a barrel, it naturally happens. That's the same thing we're now using. We've got 4 amphora. We probably buy some more because with the shape of the amphora, it also keeps that lees in suspension all the time. That's the type of things that we play with on the reserve range. So the reserve range is much more about creativity. It doesn't have to be the same every year. On the Chenin, for instance, this year, fermented some of it with white skins on the amphora, which unheard of. But the volumes are small enough that if we make a boo-boo out of that, it's very easy to blend away. So that's the difference between the two. When you go into harvest, you basically switch your brain off from anything else for about 3 months, and you just focus on the harvest. This year we were very fortunate. It was an early vintage. The Sauvignon Blanc, well, the whites are normally spread between February and March. It's either more in February, a little bit in March, or we start sort of end of February and more of it in March. This year, everything came in March. I started tasting very early in the season. Kobus, our white winemaker, was getting very, very nervous because I wasn't bringing in grapes. And I was just, the acidities were terribly, terribly high. So I told him we can't bring it in because I normally look at the pH as well. pH is a very good indicator. Keep that in mind with acidity, whether your acidity will drop out or not. So we only started picking in the first week in February. By end of March, we were finished. So you asked me what's the most horrible thing. After about 20 days of killing the guys with grapes, the capacity for white is about just under 200 tons a day. If you look at our pressures and capabilities, I pushed them up to 280, 290 tons a day. After about 20 days, Kobus came to me and he said to me, listen, he can take it. He said, but you're killing the guys. And I just explained to him, I said, Kobus, I've got no choice. Either the sugar levels are going too high or we're going to start losing flavor. So we pushed through. I'm very proud of the guys. They really worked their butts off to get all those white grapes through in February. So if you ask me, the most difficult thing for me in harvest time is being a sleigh driver. Because I know what's the best for the cellar and the wine. But sometimes it's not nice the way that you've got to drive the guys in that month.
Throughout the whole process of the winemaking, actually, which would you say is your favorite part? Like when you actually feel, you know what, you're coming up with something great.
I think during harvest time for me, it's very important for me. I spend sole time on my own very often on Sundays because it's important for me to see what we have in the cellar and what is still outside, whether we must. For instance, on Sauvignon Blanc, I need about 5-6 different styles. Some of it's got to do with ripeness. Poor farmers at ends, in the middle of the valley, they harvest the latest, and they're always on my case because from the early Sauvignon Blancs that come in, I normally just pick on a profile. I taste it and I say, I love it now, bring it in. Where towards the end of the season, I've got a good idea that we might be lacking on tropicals or minerality or something like that. Especially with the tropicals, then the grapes must stay on the vine a bit longer. Where I'm more tolerant of just getting grapes through in the beginning of the season. Towards the end of the season, I really break the farmers and say, whoa, just let it hang a week more. And they started getting nervous then because we are going into the cooler part of the season. But the most satisfying part of it is at the end of the harvest, when everything is fermented dry, we do what we call an allocation tasting, where we put everything out. It's rows and rows of little bottles of wine of each tank, and we assess them blind. I'd ask the guys not to tell me which vineyard block it is. The best blocks always come through, but I want to see if there's new surprises of some of the younger blocks coming through, for instance. But if you taste through all the whites, for instance, that we did, the reds we do per varietal, we just did the Merlots a week ago, which was, it's such nice wines. But on the white table that we tasted about a month ago, walking out of that tasting, you just feel so proud of what the guys have done in the cellar, what we've achieved in the vineyards and combined it. There was just not a single tank that I said I'm not happy with. That even includes the press wines. The ones that we're not using ourselves have now gone on to the Distell table for their allocation tasting. Even the ones that we didn't select that went to that tasting did very well on their table as well. So I think that's the most satisfying part. It's sort of ending off the season knowing that we've got good stuff in the cellar.
So I want you to ask, is using corks beneficial for long-term use?
I was hoping that that question would not pop up because I saw it here. We've made a decision a long time ago that on the whites we went over to screw caps. If you look at the quality of screw caps now, it's the technology there is absolutely incredible what the guys are doing. You can now select your screw cap to be semi-permeable. In other words, let oxygen in if you want. I've had a problem with cork since I started off 35 years ago in the industry, is that it's a non-guaranteed product. On one of our last vintages, we've bought very expensive. It's about 12 rand a cork that we bought. By the selection process with the corks, they guaranteed us that we won't have TCA on it. It will not give a cork flavor. We had a big problem with that batch. So even on their best stuff, they can't guarantee that you won't have TCA. So there's a big debate going on. I know the consumers, especially on the high end of the market, high price, and then pretty much the more uneducated people still think that a cork is superior to screw cap. I tasted at Veritas as a judge. You get the statistics that between 3 and 5% of the wines are actually TCA infected on that tasting, which is out of over 1,000 wines, 3%. That's a lot of bottles that are affected. I've carried wines from France in my luggage for 2-3 weeks, bring it back home, wanted to show the guys what great wine I bought there, corked. So that is very, very frustrating for me about cork. Cork does have benefits. They've proven that there is oxygen take-up. Over extended period of time, I don't really want too much oxygen take-up. And especially on the fresh white wines, what I put in the bottle is what I want the consumer to open back home without the influence of a cork. There were studies done, Chateau Margaux, when the cork or the screw caps really became popular and more fashionable. They actually brought out, they were doing it and no one knew about it, but they were bottling wines under screw cap and maturing it to see what happens. And they admitted over time that there was much more consistency and freshness on the wines matured in screw cap than in cork. Because in cork, you've got, every little cork is different, so you get variability from bottle to bottle, that variance that you don't have on screw caps. So I think reading between the lines, what I put in the bottle, I want the consumer to get out of the bottle without a little piece of wood influencing it.
I want to know, have you ever worked on a variety that you blend to come out in a different way? Say you wanted it to be less acidic and more fruity, and it came out to be more fruity or more acidic and less fruity. Have you ever worked on something like that? Did you fix it? Is there a way that you can fix it? Is it just spoiled? There's nothing you can do about it anymore?
That's where the vineyard comes in. It's for me, I spend a lot of time out in the vineyards tasting grapes. And that is where the fruit profile comes from. So if I get it wrong in the vineyards, it will be very difficult for us actually impossible to produce fruit in the cellar if it's not in the grapes. As far as acidity is concerned, if you go into the cellar now, it is extremely cold going in there. We're sitting with slightly elevated because we had to push the flavor profiles was satisfying. I wanted to capture that fruit, but the acidity levels were still a bit high. So what we've done on all the white wine tanks in the cellar, we kept the cooling open. So you drop the temperature down to lower than 10 degrees. Obviously, then the cooling jacket cools down the cellar, which makes it extremely uncomfortable in there. But by cooling all those white wine tanks with cold stabilization, if you take it to -4 degrees, you drop out a lot of acid. What happens if you keep it on a low temperature for a long period? A lot of acidity forms a tartaric acid, and it sits on the side of the tank. So the moment you take the wine off, there's a lot of acid crystals, tartaric crystals sitting on the tank, which have been removed. So that's a way to reduce your acidity quite drastically. So we've got tricks to manipulate, but fruit you get in the vineyard, you can't make it in the cellar.
I heard you were speaking about green pepper and paprika. I believe I heard you correctly. How do you really infuse or incorporate that into wine?
The green pepper flavors on Sauvignon, you get it very strongly on Sauvignon Blanc And the other variety that shows it is Merlot. Now, on Sauvignon Blanc, it used to be a very nice attribute. It used to be very popular. People do love it. I still like a bit of it. I do pick a couple of our vineyard blocks slightly earlier because I find that with tropical, if there's a very slight underlying green pepper flavor, but it mustn't be obvious in your face. Obviously, on Merlot, you don't want it because it gives a green character to the red wine. As I said, in general now, we're trying to farm in a way that we get rid of the green pepper flavor, different trellis systems. So to a certain extent, that green pepper flavor is actually an unripe flavor that people used to like at some stage and not anymore. So we're trying to avoid it at all. If you get it on a wine, it is fairly difficult to get rid of it at that late stage. So the solution is to get rid of it in the vineyard by getting sunlight in. I had a question here from a few of them about how did COVID-19 influence us. We're actually a bit worse off at level 4 than we were at level 5. Because at level 5, I could bring in more people. We had a different certificate then. That was preserving and bringing in the rest of the harvest. Because we still had Noble 8 harvest outside that we picked on the 24th of April. So the first part was very much still running the harvest and getting everything safe. It slowed down to a certain extent now that we do rackings on the red wines. The red blend or the white blends have been made mostly, and getting them ready for bottle. So whenever we go to level 3, hopefully we can start transporting wine again and get on with the bottling. So we're basically getting prepared for that. That the moment the door open, we must be able to just start running. So it's a bit frustrating. We're working with 30% of our normal personnel, and we've got to control it critically as well. Distell is very strict on it, which is the right thing to do. I'm actually trying with a Cellar. I'm sitting at home now, so I just go in ad hoc to see that everything's running and the guys are adhering to the procedures for COVID. And so this time of the year, we normally start traveling. So that's the one thing that is different. But in the Cellar, it's pretty much straight through from the beginning of the lockdown. It's been business as usual for us, that we were allowed to go in and do our work.
Anyway, thanks, Martin. Thanks for everything, truly. And we'll touch base again. All the best. Thanks so much.
Thanks, guys.
Okay. Cheers, guys.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.